This morning we are going to be in Matthew. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 13, starting at verse 24, as we continue with our series on the parables of Jesus. There's an old Native American story called Two Wolves, and it goes like this. An old Cherokee man once told his grandson about a fight that was going on inside of him. He said it was between two wolves. One was evil, anger, envy, arrogance, greed, self-pity, gossip, resentment, and false pride. The other wolf was good. Joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, generosity, truth, and faith. The grandson asked his grandfather, "Which wolf do you think will win?" And the old man replied, "The one that I feed." Matthew chapter 13. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered, "because while you are pulling the weeds, you may root up the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time, I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn." Now we're going to jump to verse 36. Then he left the crowd and went into the house. His disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." He answered, "The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is at the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. As the weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and we will weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. They will throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear." The great thing about this parable is that Jesus explains it. The frustrating thing about this parable is that for the most part, we still don't understand it. He who has ears, let him hear. I have ears, I still didn't hear it. And that's because we are missing a key element of what Jesus did not explain to his disciples. He didn't have to explain it to his disciples because they understood what he was talking about. We do not. So what we have here is basically a story of two sowers, two seeds, two responses, all followed by a warning. And again, I'm using Dr. John Bowling's insightful book, Windows and Mirrors, to help guide us through this parable. In this parable, there's a man who sows good seeds in his field. And while everyone is asleep, the field's owner's enemy comes in and plants bad seed among the wheat in the same field. Jesus tells his disciples that the sower is the good seed. The sower of the good seed is the Son of Man. And that's Jesus. In the book of Daniel, Daniel has a dream where he sees one like the Son of Man, who is approaching the Ancient of Days, God. And the Ancient of Days gives the Son of Man dominion over all things. The Son of Man is Jesus, who will have dominion over all things. The sower of the bad seed, or the weeds, is the devil. Jesus describes the devil as the enemy. And there is a very real struggle in this world between good and evil. There are people out there who will tell you that there is no heaven or hell. We might have God, but there's no devil. Well, Jesus tells us that there is. And today there is a huge struggle between good and evil. The Apostle Paul writes in his letter to the Ephesians, in Ephesians chapter 6, at verse 12, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." There is a very real enemy. And the devil wants to rob God of his glory because he wants it all for himself. And he will do whatever it takes to win. Now, Dr. Bowling points out that the devil wants people to look at the seed that Jesus sows, and as it grows, finds only weeds. He doesn't want people to see the wheat or the good when they look at the church. He wants them to see the hypocrites, the frauds, and the people who do and say things on Sunday and then live a completely different life the rest of the week. So the two sowers are Jesus and the devil. Now the two seeds. Jesus talks about the owner of the field sowing good seed, specifically wheat. And he has done the work and the field is planted. The sower of the bad seed comes at night in darkness. Seems right, doesn't it? From what we know about the devil, he loves to work in darkness. And he plants bad seeds. The servants find this out when the crop starts to grow. And this is the part of the parable that we miss. Unless you do a lot of farming, this can go over your head. I don't do a lot of farming. I have never done farming. We had a cornfield, soybean field, depending on the year, across the street from our house. The whole time I grew up, farming was literally 50 feet from my house. I never did any of it. I didn't know much about it. Now, the bad seeds that Jesus is talking about here, the bad seed that the enemy sows, were poisonous. The disciples knew this. The disciples knew what he was talking about. The weed that Jesus is talking about is called Darnold. And in the early stages of growth, Darnold is almost indistinguishable from wheat. You can't tell the difference. And by the time you realize what you have growing there, it's too late. And Sarah Lasko writes this about Darnold. For many centuries, perhaps as long as humans have cultivated cereal grains, wheat's evil twin has insinuated itself into our crops. In a big enough dose, this grass, Darnold, can kill a person. And farmers would have to take great care to separate it out from the true harvest. Unless they were planning, just on a side note, there were people that planted this on purpose because they would put it in alcoholic beverages to give it a kick. Darnold occupies a gray area in human agricultural history. It's definitely not good for us. And when people eat its seeds, they get dizzy, off balance, and nauseous. And its official name, L. tumultentum, comes from the Latin word for drunk. Darnold is a mimic weed, neither entirely tame or quite wild, that looks and behaves so much like wheat that it can't live without human assistance. Darnold seeds are stowaways. The plant's survival strategy requires its seeds to be harvested along with those of domesticated grasses, stored and replanted next season. So you have the good seed, which is producing wheat. And then you have the bad seed, which is producing something that looks an awful lot like wheat, but is very dangerous. The disciples got that. We don't. Those are the two seeds. Now the two responses. Once he finds the field has been contaminated, the farmer is left with a dilemma. What should he do? The servants are quick to intercede and offer to pull the weeds. Let us pull them. We'll just pull the weeds. And the farmer knows that will do more harm than good. See, the servants aren't qualified to tell the difference between the two plants. And they'll just end up pulling up the good with the bad and ruining a good crop. I never caught this before. In this parable, we are the servants. The church is there to tend the crop. We are to help water it and to feed it, but we are not to weed it because we don't know the difference. Jesus alone knows the good from the bad. He alone knows the hearts of men and women. And when the time is right, when the time is ripe, Jesus will make the call. And as the servants, we must wait for the harvest. I want to go back and read this for you. I'm going to start at verse 40 again. As the weeds are pulled and burned up in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. I want you to tell me where we are in that. We are not. We are not in that at all. It's not our job. Okay? See, the problem with us trying to sort it all out is that we have trouble with right and wrong. I want you to be honest with yourself. In the time that you have been trying to serve Jesus, have you ever done anything wrong? Have you ever done lots of things wrong? Does that make you the best judge of what is right? Sometimes good people do the wrong thing. If we as children of God can make wrong decisions, then how are we going to make the best judges? It doesn't work that way. We have to leave the judging to the one who is worthy and righteous. Otherwise, we will do more harm than good. If we start judging people and pulling them and casting them aside, we are going to lose a lot of good people. And then Jesus finishes the explanation of this parable with a warning. There will be a judgment. And that's part of our problem is man, we really want people to get what they deserve. And so we are right there to help Jesus. You know what? Jesus, you don't need to worry about it. I got this. I'll judge these guys. You go ahead and do other things. We really want there to be a judgment. And there will be. And there will be a distinguishing from the good crop and the bad. But Jesus sees all sides of everything we do. He knows the circumstances that surround the decisions that we make. And when we try to manage righteousness on our own, our track record is very poor. The Crusades, the Inquisition, all of that stuff. That was all on our own. We're terrible at that. We can't always tell the wheat from the weeds. So God just releases us from that burden. Isn't that good to know? We don't have to do that. We don't have to make those judgment calls on other people. Wow. That's a load off of my plate. Now the devil would have this world look at the church and see a lot of weeds mixed in. And honestly, in the midst of some failure, the world might view me as a weed. And there's that possibility for all of us, in all of us. I have a poem I want to share with you. It's called The Cookie Thief. A woman was waiting at an airport one night with several long hours before her flight. She hunted for a book in the airport shop, bought a bag of cookies, and found a place to drop. She was engrossed in her book, but happened to see that the man beside her, as bold as could be, grabbed a cookie or two from the bag between, which she tried to ignore to avoid a scene. She read, munched cookies, and watched the clock as the gutsy cookie thief diminished her stock. She was getting more irritated as the minutes ticked by, thinking, if I wasn't so nice, I'd blacken his eye. With each cookie she took, he took one too. When only one was left, she wondered what he'd do. With a smile on his face and a nervous laugh, he took the last cookie and broke it in half. He offered her half as he ate the other. She snatched it from him and thought, oh, brother, this guy has some nerve and he's also rude. Why, he didn't even show any gratitude. She had never known when she had been so galled and sighed with relief when her flight was called. She gathered her belongings and headed for the gate, refusing to look back at the thieving ingrate. She boarded the plane and sank in her seat, then sought her book, which was almost complete. As she reached in her baggage, she gasped with surprise. There was her bag of cookies in front of her eyes. If mine are here, she moaned with despair, then the others were his, and he tried to share. Too late to apologize, she realized with grief that she was the rude one, the ingrate, the thief. We don't always get it right. We struggle with what wolf is in charge. But Jesus doesn't. He will take care of everything. If we just concentrate on the life He wants us to lead, that'll be enough. Could you stand with me, please? Heavenly Father, Lord, sometimes I don't know why you put up with us. Because we are a judgmental people, whether we want to think it or not. It's so easy for us to take a glance at somebody and assume we know everything about them. Lord, thank you. Thank you for not letting us be the judges. Thank you that we can just sit back and work on the life that you've given us. And we don't have to worry about how others are living theirs. You'll take care of that. Lord, honestly, it's good to know that we're not in charge. That we can step back. Oh, the pressure's off. All we have to do is worry about our lives. And I don't mean that we don't worry about those around us or care about those or their lives, but they are part of our lives. But we don't have to worry about someone that we just see or hear things about or how somebody dresses or how somebody talks or what kind of mood somebody's in. You got that. And we thank you for that. We praise you for that. Father, this is really a very uplifting, heart-lifting parable. Knowing that in the end you've got it. And you're the one in charge. Who else better than you? We thank you for that. Father, I ask this week that you help us to bear this in mind. Father, when we look at somebody, help us to not judge them. Help us to not wonder what they've done. Lord, help us not be the cookie thief. Move on us this week. And I ask this in your precious name. Amen. You're dismissed. Don't forget, next week, potluck. If you couldn't be here this week, but you're planning on coming next week and you want to bring something, just email me. Let me know what you're bringing. All right? Email Judy, and Judy's going to send out an email so that you'll have her address. All right. You all have a good week.